There is a moment in life when something shifts silently within. It is not a visible mystical event. It is not a physical door opening. It is an internal point where you realize you can no longer pretend you don't know what you know. Maybe you have felt this recently. A greater clarity about your own thoughts, a different awareness of how you react, a sense that repeating the same stories no longer makes sense. This is the true portal. It did not open in the world. It opened in your consciousness, and when consciousness takes command, reality begins to follow. Before we begin, I want to ask you something simple but important. Tell me here in the comments what you think about our content. Your feedback strengthens this project far more than you imagine. And if this type of message is truly expanding your consciousness, leave your like now. It's not just a click. It's a way of saying you want to see more content that elevates or awakens, that reorganizes your mind. Now let's get to the central point. The internal recognition. The moment when consciousness takes command. The portal is not external. It does not open in the sky. It does not appear as a visible mystical sign. It is a level of consciousness that has been accessed within you. It is the instant when you realize your thoughts are not passive commentary about life. They are its directors. While you believe that reality simply happened, you reacted. You reacted to circumstances, to people, to the news, to the unexpected. But the moment you realize your mental pattern creates direction, you step out of autopilot. And stepping out of autopilot is the true beginning of change. This is the exact point where the timeline begins to shift. Transformation does not begin when something extraordinary happens outside. It does not begin when an unexpected opportunity appears, or when someone shows up to fix your life. It begins when you decide to think deliberately, when you choose not to automatically repeat fear, when you interrupt the old narrative before it gains strength and becomes identity. It is not about waiting for signs from the universe. It is about assuming conscious intention. The second you understand that every repeated thought is a choice of trajectory, something reorganizes internally. You begin to notice where you were reinforcing doubt without realizing it, where you were feeding insecurity as if it were prudence, where you were keeping old versions of yourself alive simply out of habit. Recognition is power because it eliminates the illusion of randomness. You stop seeing yourself as someone unlucky or at the mercy of chance. You begin to see that you were sustaining direction. And when you change direction mentally, you change the inclination of your route. This is the true point of activation, the new mental direction. Your focus defines the next reality. Timeline is not a fixed destiny. It is a sequence of vibrational choices. Each sustained thought creates a small inclination. Small repeated inclinations create completely different realities. Repeated thought becomes an active field of manifestation. What you keep alive in your mind begins to gain structure. If the focus changes, the scenario changes. Not because the world revolves around you, but because your perception begins to filter opportunities compatible with the new direction. If you begin to sustain a vision of growth, you start to notice doors you once ignored. If you sustain a narrative of limitation, you continue to see barriers even when alternatives exist. Focus is a filter, and the filter determines experience. Directing the mind is choosing which version of your life gains strength. You can continue mentally revisiting old frustrations, reinforcing stories of failure, feeding doubt as if it were prudence. Or you can begin training your mind to sustain the version you wish to consolidate. This is not fantasy. It is strategic repetition. When you understand that prolonged focus organizes reality, you stop allowing any external stimulus to steal your internal direction. You begin to protect your attention because you understand that attention is fuel. The new timeline does not begin when something magical happens. It begins when your focus stops being reactive and becomes intentional. If you'd like, I can continue now with the next two topics, deepening the feeling as an activation code and internal alignment as the stabilizer of this new route. Feeling as an activation code. Thought opens the door, but feeling keeps the portal active. Many people believe it is enough to change what they think, but they continue feeling exactly as before. And that is where the timeline fails to sustain itself. Sustained emotion is organized energy. The field responds to the predominant internal climate, not to a well-constructed phrase. You can repeat that you trust, he said, but if your baseline state is tension, the dominant signal is still insecurity. Feeling before seeing is not pretending. It is internal preparation. It is allowing your body to recognize as natural what you want to live. When you feel like someone who is already inserted into the new reality, you send the field a message of compatibility. Ask yourself honestly, am I already feeling compatible with what I desire? Or am I still feeling like someone who is waiting for proof? The question is not when it will happen. The question is whether your nervous system already recognizes it as possible without going into alert. Because while the body reacts with fear, the mind may even want it, but the field receives conflict. Feeling is the vibrational seal. If you desire prosperity, but feel guilt, imagining prospering more than others, there is resistance. If you desire love, but feel distrust, imagining surrender, there is blockage. If you desire expansion, but feel fear of judgment, there is active contradiction. When feeling changes, perception changes. When perception changes, choices change. When choices change, the timeline gains a new direction. The portal remains open as long as the feeling is coherent with the new route. Internal alignment. Coherence between desire and identity. It is not enough to want something new while maintaining the old identity. The timeline shifts when your self-image shifts. While you see yourself as someone who struggles, you will continue attracting situations that require struggle. While you see yourself as someone who always needs to prove value, you will continue entering testing scenarios. Ask yourself seriously, who do I need to be to live what I desire? Not in external terms, in internal terms. How does this version think? How does it react? How does it decide? Your vibrational identity precedes manifestation. You do not attract only things. You attract experiences compatible with who you believe you are. If you desire stability, but internally still identify with chaos, your mind will seek environments that confirm that identity. If you desire prosperity but define yourself as someone unlucky, you will continue reinforcing that pattern. Alignment is adjusting posture, decisions, and internal pattern to what you want to experience. It is not changing the world first. It is changing the way you position yourself within it. When your self-image reorganizes, your choices begin to reflect it. You stop accepting less than you desire. You stop placing yourself in situations that reinforce the old narrative. You stop repeating stories that sustain the previous line. And here is the crucial point. Coherence accelerates. When thought, emotion, and behavior point in the same direction, the field finds no noise. The response becomes faster because the signal is stable. The portal does not close when you doubt for a moment. It weakens when you return to identifying with who you already decided to leave behind. The law responds to vibration, but materializes through coherent movement. It is not desperate action that confirms change. It is action that is born from clarity. There is a huge difference between acting to force a result and acting because the new state is already consolidated within you. Forced action carries fear of loss. Inspired action carries naturalness. When you truly change internally, your decisions change without dramatic effort. You begin to say no to what you once accepted. You begin organizing your routine differently. You begin responding differently to the same situations. Small aligned decisions create major redirections, because each decision reinforces the new identity, and reinforced identity stabilizes the new timeline. Inspired action is not about doing more. It is about doing differently. It is noticing a calm impulse and following it. It is acting without the need to prove anything to anyone. It is choosing with quiet conviction. When you act as someone who is already in the new scenario, the scenario begins to follow. Not because you demanded it, but because you demonstrated compatibility. And compatibility creates correspondence, openness to receive. Permission is part of the process. Many people activate desire, align thought, stabilize feeling, begin acting differently, and still block receiving. How? By trying to control the format, by trying to predict the path, by trying to monitor the timing. Receiving requires absence of resistance, and resistance often appears as tense expectation. The person says they trust, but is constantly checking if it is arriving. Light expectation is more powerful than anxiety, because lightness communicates security. Anxiety communicates lack. Allowing reality to surprise you is vibrational maturity. It is accepting that perhaps the path will not be exactly as you imagined, yet still be the right one. The timeline reorganizes through routes you cannot always predict. People appear in unexpected ways. Opportunities arise in unlikely contexts. Subtle invitations shift entire trajectories. But this only happens when you stop squeezing the process. Permission is relaxing without abandoning intention. It is remaining aligned without trying to control every detail. Vibrational maintenance. Keeping the new line active timeline shifting is not an isolated event. It is state maintenance. Oscillations are normal, but the predominant pattern defines the result. If you access clarity for one day and return to doubt for a week, the old pattern remains active. The new line stabilizes when the new state becomes familiar. When you return to focus whenever you notice dispersion, when you correct direction without dramatizing deviation, vibrational consistency is what consolidates reality. It is not momentary intensity. It is not emotional peak. It is conscious repetition. The question is not whether you will oscillate. The question is, do you return to the new or return to the old? Every time you choose to return to the aligned state, you weaken the old line. Every time you sustain the new pattern, even in external silence, you strengthen the new route. You did not enter a mystical portal. You accessed a new level of consciousness. And when consciousness changes in a stable way, the timeline inevitably follows. Now tell me something honestly. Do you already feel that you can no longer go back to thinking the way you did before? If you feel that, comment here, I have already crossed. Not as an empty affirmation, but as an internal recognition. And if this type of content is helping you consolidate this new version of yourself, subscribe now. Because what stabilizes a new timeline is consistency of consciousness. And that is built day after day. You did not awaken to go back to sleep.